Hello everyone, it's Robin the Delta Crafter. I want to thank you for joining me for another video on my YouTube channel. I am so excited to have you joining me today because today's video is a part of the Card Crafters Collaborative. I'm the host of this collaboration featuring several talented card makers. These ladies are some of my favorites to watch on YouTube, and so we've all come together around the central theme of Spring Florals to bring you some new and exciting videos. Be sure to check out everyone's videos, which will be linked in the description box below. Let's go ahead and jump into my video. For my card that I'll be making today, I'll be using several products from Honeybee Stamps. The first set that I'm going to be using is the Lovely Layers Anemone flower set. I'm also going to be using the Lovely Layers Tulip set, as well as the Mugs and Kisses set that was released this past Christmas holiday season. I absolutely love this set. So many cute cards I've seen made with that. And then finally, I'm going to be using the Enjoy Stamp and Die set, also from Honeybee. I'm going to be using the Milled Lavender and Saltwater Taffy Distress inks. There will be a couple of other stamps and inks that I'll be using throughout the video because I make some decisions about the card as I'm putting it together, and I'll be sure to mention those as I use them. As always, I'm going to be using some accent opaque 120-pound paper for my card base, and then I'm going to be using Neenah Classic Crest Solar White for my card panel. Today's card will be 5x7, which is not my typical card size, but I wanted to make it this size because I wanted to make sure I had room for all the elements that I'm going to be using. To save time, I went ahead and die cut several of the flowers and all the parts and pieces for the flowers, the stems, the leaves and everything off camera. I also die cut some of the mugs so I would have those ready and on hand. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to start with my panel because I'm going to ink blend some saltwater taffy as a sort of a soft peach background for the flowers rather. And because I want this ink to just be completely dried back and settled into the paper, I'm going to go ahead and start with this first. So I'm going to be using my ink blending brush, and I'm going to come directly onto the paper and ink blend some of this saltwater taffy onto my paper. If you've watched any of my videos before, then you know that ink blending is my favorite technique. It's a technique to use for card making. It's my jam, and so you shouldn't be surprised that I have some ink blending on this card. I actually have quite a bit of ink blending. So I've come in and I've laid down quite a bit of this saltwater taffy, and I'm going to give that just a little bit of time to settle down and into the paper and get to be even and nice for the background. I absolutely love this saltwater taffy. This is Tim's latest color addition to the Distress inks, and it is fabulous. So now I'm going to bring back in all those die cut pieces for the flowers and the stems. And I'm going to be adding a little bit of ink to each layer of these flowers. I looked up several pictures of anemones, and I chose one to emulate or to copy, and that had a lavender center to it. And I thought that would go well with some purple tulips. So that's going to be my flower color theme. So I'm coming in with my small blending brush into the middle of the first layer of this anemone. And this anemone flower set for the Lovely Layer set has about 3 pieces to the main flower, to the largest flower in the anemone, for the petals, and then it has 3 pieces for the middle of the flower as well. So each of these 3 layers is going to get a little bit of this milled lavender inking right in the center of it. This is going to add a lot of dimension and depth to this flower, especially when it's when it comes together in its final form. So I'm going to ink kind of trying to figure out how to line these up. This was my first time using this anemone, so I did have to look up how to actually layer the pieces together. So now I'm going to move on to the pieces of the tulips, and there are several tulips in this die set. And I have to be honest with you, this die set is quite intricate to use because there are so many pieces. There are 3 flowers. There's a large, a medium, and a small, like a bud type flower in this die set. So I did have to look up how these pieces are supposed to be layered. And some of the pieces, there's also pieces to the stem and the leaves and everything. So some of the pieces aren't that obvious of where they belong. So you really have to look at the go to the honeybee website and figure out which die belongs where. But once you do, then it's easy to assemble. So I've decided to switch to Dusty Concord as my ink for the darker purple tulip. That milled lavender just was not showing up enough. So I switched to Dusty Concord, and you can see there that it added so much depth and texture. And again, if you look at the flowers now, the inks have all had a chance to dry back, and it just adds so much to these flowers. I've also gone ahead off camera and inked up all the leaves and the stems, and everything is ready to be assembled. I love the how inking the edges of all the flowers and the leaves and the stems just adds so much to what could otherwise just be a very flat looking set of die cuts. So I'm going to be using my Barely Arts glue. I love this glue. It's a great glue, but I especially love that tiny needle nose nozzle that it has. So now I'm going to be assembling the largest anemone. And you can see here how once you find where the edges line up and align, it is really pretty easy to put together. So I'm going to put those 2 together, and I'm going to add the 3rd layer as well. And then I'm going to use my reverse tweezers to hold everything in place while I move on and assemble some of the rest of the flowers. So here's the 3rd layer of this largest flower. And I'm only applying glue to the middle of the flowers because that gives me the option to raise up some of the petals if I want to, or I don't have to if I don't want to. But if I was to glue them down, I definitely would not be able to do that. So now I'm going to glue the 3 pieces of the center of the flower together. So I've gone ahead and assembled all of the flowers, and now I'm going to come in with this last remaining medium tulip and assemble it together. This is I've decided to cut both a dark purple and a light lavender medium tulip because I just wasn't sure which one I wanted to use. And even if I decide not to use both of them, I can still have whatever remaining flowers I have left over I can use on another card so they won't go to waste. So now that I've gotten all the flowers assembled, and you can see how beautiful they are when they are fully assembled, it's time to move on to the next part of the card. Now we're ready to work on the background of the card. I'm going to be adding the sentiment using that Enjoy stamp and die set, well actually just the stamp set, and I'm going to be using that as my sentiment for this card. In order to make sure that I have everything placed correctly, I'm going to kind of lay out some of the pieces of the card, the die cut elements to kind of give me an idea of where things might fall so I can make sure that my sentiment is placed correctly. So I'm going to bring in those 2 largest flowers to get an idea for placement and spacing. So I've gotten them kind of laid down. They're not glued down, they're just laid down. And now I can see where this large Enjoy stamp might work best. So I'm going to use the large Enjoy, and I'm going to use 2 of the sub-sentiments as well. And they're going to be off to the right of the Enjoy. So the sub-sentiments that I'm choosing to use are every and moment. So the card is going to say enjoy every moment. thought that was very fitting for such beautiful, lovely flowers that are going to be on this card. I'm going to grab the stamps with the door of my MISTI, and now we're ready to stamp. Because I'm going to be heat embossing these sentiments, I'm going to come in with my powder tool from Rabbit Hole Designs. I absolutely love this powder tool. And I'm going to put some powder onto my panel. I'm going to stamp the sentiments with VersaFine Onyx Black ink, which is a pigment ink, and that means it's going to stay wet a little bit longer, and that will allow me to add the clear embossing powder to the sentiment. Going to hit that with my heat tool to melt the embossing powder, and then we'll be ready to move on. So for my mug, if you haven't figured out now, I'm going to have like a coffee mug and have some flowers coming out of that coffee mug. But I didn't want just a plain white coffee mug. So what I decided to do was I decided to add some texture by stamping on the coffee mug. I'm using the Buffalo Check bold print stamp from Hero Arts to add some design and texture to the mug. This is a great stamp to have in your stash. You don't see it here, but I'm actually stamping this, using this stamp with Salvage Patina Distress ink. I wanted to make sure that the mug looked realistic, so I put a little piece of another mug up at the top, which is where the inside of the mug would be. So I laid that on, actually glued that down with some removable adhesive so that the Buffalo Check stamp would not stamp on what would be the inside of the mug. Just a little detail that I'm adding there, or going to the trouble for there, that I think makes all the difference, because details are important when you're creating. So after stamping the mug, I decided that the white part of the mug was just a little bit too stark for me. So I'm going to take some ink and my small ink blending brush, and I'm going to ink blend the white parts of the mug and kind of tone them down a little bit. So I'm just going to do that right there in my MISTI, and that's going to help tone that white part down a little bit. So now we're ready to assemble everything. So you can see off to the right there, my mug, I have actually two mugs. The mug that I stamped with the Buffalo Check background, I actually trimmed down because the ink kind of bled into parts that I didn't want inked up. And now I've cut a second mug, and I'm going to glue that on top of, glue the Buffalo Check mug piece to that whole mug. But before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and cut a slit into the curvature of the mug, because I want my the stems of my flowers to kind of slide into that part of the mug. Again, the details that you put into your card creations are just what's going to add so much uniqueness to your creation. So I'm gluing the buffalo piece down, and you can see there it really does look like a mug, and like the white inside of a mug where your coffee would be, or your hot chocolate. So I've glued the mug down to the card panel, and now I'm going to start assembling the cards and kind of placing things to see how I want them to be. So because I've made that slit, I'm able to slide my stem of my tulip down into the mug. See, doesn't that look so cute? So I've got my large tulip on there. I've placed my anemone. I'm going to place a couple of the leaves for the anemone down as well. Not quite sure where everything's going to go. So I'm playing around a little bit, and I highly encourage you to do this as well. Play around with things and see how you want to lay your flowers out. I'm coming in with the medium tulip, and it's not quite fitting going in the upright position. So I'm going to keep playing around and see how everything goes. How I can make everything fit together. So I've decided to turn the medium tulip with like a downward position, and that I think was the key to making that one fit onto the card. I added a few more pieces of greenery and then I was satisfied with where everything was positioned. So in order to keep everything in the position that I have it in, I'm going to use a trick that I learned from Jennifer McGuire, which is to use a piece of press and seal. This is a genius hack that is especially useful for instances like this. So while I have everything on the press and seal, I went ahead and added some liquid adhesive to the back of all the parts and pieces of the different flowers, and I'm able to lay those pieces down exactly where I want them to be on my card panel. Because there are so many layers to these flowers, I decided to place an acrylic block on the flowers to apply a little bit of weight to make sure that they all adhere to the panel. So I'm bringing in a second block on the side here. Now that everything has dried in place, I'm going to peel back this press and seal, and now my card panel is complete. I am so in love with the way that this came together. So remember that little small bud that I made when I was ink blending and die cutting all the parts and pieces? I decided to go ahead and add that in the top left of the arrangement, and then add an additional piece of greenery as well. This little mug of flowers has come together so beautifully, and I think it's just a perfect spring floral arrangement. So now I'm going to adhere the card panel to my card base using my ATG gun and some permanent adhesive. Put that all over the back. And again, this is a 5x7 card, and it has quite a bit of weight on it because of the layered flowers. So you want to make sure that you're using a good strong adhesive that can stand up to the weight of the panel. So I'm going to press that down all over, and by doing that, my card is finished. Let's take a closer look at this spring floral card. The lovely layered dies from Honeybee are so fantastic. Look at all the dimension that is created by those layers on these flowers. So beautiful. And I am going to decide to bend up the petals just a little bit to provide just the slightest amount of dimension to these flowers. And with that, everyone, my card is finished. Thank you for joining me for this video in the Card Crafters Collaborative. Be sure to check out everyone else's video, which will be listed in the description below. You can also join me on Instagram and Facebook at The Delta Crafter, and be sure to stop by my blog, thedeltacrafter.com, where you will find all the products used today listed and linked. Have a great day, everyone. Enjoy!